these beautiful white oak floors were installed, and this staircase was rebuilt, and it was rebuilt out of real wood. It's just a basic pine though, and we wanted to have it sort of match the flooring so that it would flow really nicely into the next room. So we're going to use milk paint, and we're going to create a beautiful custom blend, gray off white. It's super easy to do, little to no prep on bare wood, and then we're going to add a nice top coat so it's super durable for your steps. So when mixing milk paint, I start with my water first, and I'm gonna do a 1 part water and 1 part powder ratio. Now I'm gonna be using marble. It is our beautiful off-white with a hint of gray to it, but I'm gonna add a little bit of black just to gray it up a little bit more. So I'm gonna add about 2 scoops into here, and I say just play with it and adjust. So if it's a little bit transparent, you can always add a little more powder. All right, so I've got about 2 scoops of that in there. So to customize this milk paint, the gray that we have, I just want it to be a little bit darker to kind of match some of the tones in the floor. So I'm gonna take my little black dress, which is our black milk paint, and I'm gonna add half a teaspoon. That's it. You don't need a lot to really darken up your milk paint. And you can do this to any of the milk paint colors. If you just wanna have a slightly darker shade, you can easily adjust. So I've added my powder to the water. I'm just gonna grab a regular fork and stir it. If you've got a whisk, that's even better, but it doesn't really matter. Just give it a go, stir it around. So 1 part powder to 1 part water, and then just adjust as needed. The great thing about using milk paint on bare porous wood is that it soaks right in. You don't need to do any prep other than just wipe away any dust that may be around. Go ahead and you can paint right onto it. And the great thing with milk paint on bare wood is that it soaks right in, it binds in with the wood, and it really cements itself to it. So it's exceptionally durable, especially for any kind of flooring or steps. Great for kitchen tabletops, anything like that you need a lot of durability for. Milk paint is amazing when applied to a porous surface like a bare wood. Never going to chip or peel, which is amazing. All right, so you have a really thin consistency when working with milk paint. It should kind of be like a table cream-ish. That's kind of what you're looking for. A lot of people think it should be a little thicker. They're used to kind of like a chalk paint or an acrylic paint or like a fusion mineral paint, which is a little bit thicker. And if you make it too thick, it'll actually be harder to work with. So really, it's actually a much thinner paint. I'm gonna set this aside. So if you're doing a custom color, I would recommend that you do some testing of your color first on a spare piece of wood to make sure you're super happy with it. I'm not overly particular with this one. I just want a nice sort of off-white gray. So as I brush it on, I can sort of see the color. But keep in mind that when you're working with milk paints, it looks different when it's wet versus dry. And then once you add your top coat, it's really gonna look different. So you should test it out on a spare piece of wood ahead of time, just to make sure you're super happy with it. There we go. It looks absolutely gorgeous. It's got a bit of a thin coat here from what I can tell. I feel like I maybe need to add a little bit more powder to it, or you could just go ahead and add a second coat. Totally up to you. It applies so easily. I have only dipped my brush once. Using this natural bristle brush really holds a lot of paint, which is great, so you don't have a messy paint job, but you literally could just pour the milk paint on as well. So you can get it into the corners and then sort of even it out. And if you have any of these little bubbles or anything like that, just work them out. Milk paint is very, very thin and very forgiving, especially when it comes to anything like brush strokes. You're not really gonna get brush strokes with milk paint because of its sort of self-leveling properties. And the great thing about using milk paint is each coat dries in about 15 to 20 minutes, and you can go ahead with your next coat if you need it. And as it's drying, it's actually curing, which is really unique and different from many other paints on the market. So after that, sort of 20 minutes, if it's dry to the touch, it's cured, it's ready to go. You can put your top coat on. So I'm gonna go ahead and continue painting on while this step is drying. And then we'll get to our top coat after. So you can also pour your milk paint onto your surface. That's a really quick and easy way to get a lot of paint onto a surface at once. And then you can just brush it around. If you have too much on there, you can put it back into your cup. But man, does it make your job go so fast. So I noticed with my first experiment that it wasn't quite thick enough. So I went ahead and I added a little bit more of the powder, and then I just brushed, just mixed it around with a whisk again, and then tried brushing it out here, and I'm happy with how this looks. Oh, I'm getting some drips. Drips, drips. But I really like this coverage. It's a lot better. And it's still really thin, as you can tell with the drips, but the coverage is much better. So if you ever are painting with milk paint and it just seems too thin for you, go ahead and add a little more. Let's see what it looks like back here. It's amazing for a project like this size. You only need probably a tester bag. You don't need too much. A little goes a long way. One of the large bags will definitely do like a full armoire. All right, so I'm gonna paint right over this knot. And if I didn't want the knot to show through, I would put a little bit of Zinsser shellac on there to make sure that it would stop any bleed through. But I actually don't mind the really rustic look and having the knots kind of show through. So I'm going to opt out of doing that. It's one less product to use. Our milk painted steps have now had about half an hour to dry. I did end up putting 2 coats on just to make it really nice and opaque. Sometimes your first coat isn't fully opaque, so go ahead and add a second one. Wait 20 to 30 minutes between each one to dry. Now that it's dry, I can go ahead with my top coat. The paint is completely cured and ready. So I'm gonna be using our stain and finishing oil. This oil is a really beautiful, hard wearing oil. It's strong enough for floors. It comes in 6 different colors. And this one, I'm gonna be using our white. So it's gonna add a little bit of a whitewash effect to it as well, and just brighten it up a little bit. Not to fully match the floors. You still wanna have a bit of a transition so people don't miss the steps, but just to kind of neutral out and add a little bit of that beachy effect to this. Really easy to use. You're gonna wanna give it a nice shake. All the pigments can settle to the bottom. Once you've shaken it up, you're gonna open it and you're gonna give it a stir as well, just to make sure there's nothing stuck at the bottom. So I'll do it on here.
When you stir it, put it maybe next to the sponge and stir.
Okay. Beautiful. So taking a stir stick, you want to go right to the bottom and make sure that there's nothing sitting there in terms of pigment. I can feel right to the bottom, there's nothing there, so we're all good. That looks great. It's important to note that the stain and finishing oil can have a slightly yellow tinge to it because it's a natural oil, and oils do have that yellow tint, but the white pigment in here will kind of help to combat that, which is great. Before we get to oiling, one thing you may notice with your milk painted project is that it feels a little bit rough. You can sort of hear that. That is completely normal. When you're working with milk paint on bare wood, what it does is the water from the milk paint goes into the wood surface and kind of raises the grain a little bit, which means you get a little bit of texture there. Really easy to take a fine grit sanding paper or a sanding sponge like this. This is about an 800 or so, and you're just gonna pass across it a few times, and it's really gonna knock down that roughness. And that's it. So just a couple passes over, and then it goes super smooth, really beautiful and nice. If you were gonna do hemp oil on here, you could actually put the hemp oil on first and then sand. That would be called a wet sand. We could still do that with this, but the hemp oil would kind of give a resist to this oil here, which is the pigmented white. We don't want much of a resist on there. We really wanna see that white pigment. So we're gonna do just a really quick sand, and then we're gonna put our sand and finishing oil on top. So I finished my sanding, and I'm gonna just wipe away the excess dust with a rag. You may see a little bit of the pigment of the paint, totally normal as well. And for the stain and finishing oil, I like to pour it on and then brush it around and wipe it back. taking any sort of brush that you have, a synthetic or an easy chip brush, and you just want to brush it on, get it all around. So this is going to seal your milk paint. It's going to usually bring out the true color of milk paint, but because we have a pigment in this finish, it's going to kind of play with that true color a little bit. So this is going to make it look a little bit whiter and lighter than it would have been if you had just put, say, a hemp oil on instead. But because we're doing, you know, flooring and stairs, I wanted to have a really durable finish, plus add a little pigment to it. Okay, so that's lots there. Can use it back here too. We have lots of open time with this product, which means you have a long time to work with it. So it can be really messy at the beginning. That's no problem. And then we're going to remove the excess. There we go. It has a little bit of a smell to it, but it's not too bad to work with, which is nice. And this is strong enough for floors. So it's a really great product, but you can also use it for kitchen tables, dining tables, end tables, and flooring. Anything you want. All right, so there's quite a bit on there. Now I'm gonna wipe back the excess. So I'm gonna take this and set it aside. We have these really great applicator pads, and these, you can apply the product with it, and you can also remove it with it. So for me, typically I like to apply it with a brush and then remove it with this, but you could do it either way. Totally up to you. The key with this is consistent pressure end to end. So I'm just kind of soaking this a little bit right now, and then I'm gonna wipe back and make it really nice and even and smooth. So the first little bit looks a little messy, and then it gets more even. Just to get into the corners, use that brush. And again, I'm not really under any time constraint because this has so much open working time with it. I just really want to make sure I get into all the corners and saturate it to protect the wood. This is going to add a really nice sort of soft matte finish to it. The more coats that you add, the higher the sheen will go. When you're removing the excess, if there is an inconsistent amount on here, you may see a little heavier oil left behind in some areas, so you will want to make sure that it's an even sort of surface that you're removing it from. And these are a one use. You can flip them around and use the other side. So if I wanted to, I can just flip that around and use that. It's going to remove a little bit more because it's much more dry on that side. There you go. So end to end, nice, even, consistent pressure. And there we have it. So you can really see how the white here with the finishing oil looks a little bit lighter versus this one here that just has the regular milk paint. So had I added hemp oil to it, it would have gone richer and darker, but because I used our white stain and finishing oil, it's just gone to be a little bit lighter. You can apply another coat if you want to after 12 hours. If you like the color how it is and you just want to add more protection, you could use the natural, that's our clear stain and finishing oil. It'll increase the sheen even more, and yeah, it's just really great to add more if you feel like you need it.